Hello, and welcome to the 15th episode of A Woman Robbed, a bonus series from And the Runner-Up Is, where we talk about actresses who may have come close to earning Oscar nominations, but were ultimately overlooked or omitted, or for one reason or another just didn't have the votes to make it into the final lineup, and discussing why they may have deserved to get in and why they ultimately did not. Each episode has its own theme, presented as a double feature, and this week we are going to be covering two performances from the 50s that did not earn Oscar nominations. And joining me today to help me break these down is a frequent guest on this show over the years, but it's been quite a bit of time since you last heard her helping me break down the Best Actress lineup of 1942, Greer Garson's win for Mrs. Miniver, Bette Davis, and Now Voyager. It was quite a time. Welcome back, Casey Lee Clark.
Oh my God. Thank you so much for having me, Kevin. It's always great to hear from you and also to listen to you as well.
Yes, same for you. I know it's been a little bit, but I'm excited to be once again traveling back several decades to talk about great leading actresses with you.
Same with you.
Well, let's get into it. So first of all, I presented to my patrons here at And the Runner-Up Is a list of 15 of the most notable performances of the 50s that were not nominated for Oscars, and the choices were, to recap, Joan Crawford in Johnny Guitar, Danielle Darrieux in The Earrings of Madame de, Marlene Dietrich in Witness for the Prosecution, Gloria Graham in A Lonely Place, Grace Kelly in Rear Window, Deborah Kerr in Tea and Sympathy, Julieta Messina in La Strada, Marilyn Monroe in Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, Jean Moreau in Elevator to the Gallows, Kim Novak in Vertigo, Maureen O'Hara in The Quiet Man, Debbie Reynolds in Singin' in the Rain, Simone Signoret in Diabolique, Gene Simmons in Home Before Dark, and Jane Wyman in All That Heaven Allows. A very, very good crop of possibilities there, but the top vote getters were Marilyn Monroe and Jane Wyman. So those are the two we'll be breaking down today. Marlene Dietrich came very close as well, as did Debbie Reynolds, but Marilyn and Jane were far and away the choices for the patrons. So before we talk about these two performances and these two actresses, would love to just know your thoughts on, the 50s overall, the films of this era, if you had thoughts on that, especially from like actresses like the ones we'll be talking about today, whether you have any kind of fondness for this era, wherever you want to go with it.
Yeah, I really love 50s cinema. I've especially gotten into 50s cinema, I think, in recent years. I think I was always like, oh my God, 60s and 70s or like the 40s. But now I think I love Technicolor so much. So that's an easy gateway into 50s cinema, but also like some of those titles that you mentioned that didn't get picked for this, like a lot of the Hitchcock titles in the 50s, a lot of the musicals, noir, things like that. And like the rise of like international cinema becoming more prevalent to American audiences. But yeah, and then also we're just talking about two of the greats with Howard Hawks and Douglas Sirk. So can't get better than that to me.
Yeah. Speaking of great Technicolor right there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, the 50s are always interesting also because it does feel like we're inching toward the desire to do away with the production code. We're still kind of in the post-war era of the conservatism in the early 50s and conformity, which is kind of a big theme, especially in All That Heaven Allows, and eventually getting to that point of wanting to shake things up. Plus, we have the popularity of television and films having to compete with that. So we're definitely at a interesting, or getting to a transition point, I would say, even if we're not quite there yet. Lots of emphasis on Technicolor, like you said. And I think also just the performance style is starting to become a little more realistic and grounded and naturalistic because of the rise of foreign films doing things differently. And I think the two performances that we have here are really interesting, especially in these films that are, at least on the surface, it seems like very of their time in terms of just, old-fashioned entertainment, or in the case of like All That Heaven Allows, like high melodrama. And you wouldn't mistake these films for coming out in any other decade, really, but the 50s. But then when you really look at them, I do think they're both doing very compelling things in terms of subverting some of those standards and like character dynamics, and especially female characterization, and giving these women opportunity to really stretch in terms of broad comedy, like in Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, or just really internalized work like what Jane Wyman is doing. So yeah, will be interesting to explore some of those themes. So, shall we jump right into it?
Absolutely.
All right. Well, we are starting off with Marilyn Monroe in Gentlemen Prefer Blondes.
Yeah, just hold it for a minute. Of course. How do you put it around your neck?
You don't, Lovey. It goes on your head.
You must think I was born yesterday.
Well, sometimes there's just no other possible explanation.
No, no, my dear, she's quite right. Like so. It's a tiara.
You do wear it on your head. I just love finding new places to wear diamonds.
So, Marilyn Monroe is obviously an actress that we never got to talk about on the Best Actress series, but we have talked about her before on A Woman Robbed for her performance in Some Like It Hot, which was 6 years after Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. So, don't really need to do a big, huge introduction here since I already kind of did that on the last one, but just as a reminder of where she was at this point in her career, she was a rising star in the late 40s and early 50s, especially as a sex symbol, and she had been in quite a few supporting roles, but not really carrying many as a lead. But in 1953, it was a huge turning point where she first had Niagara, then she had Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, which is a huge comedic showcase, musical showcase. And then her third film is How to Marry a Millionaire, all successes at the box office. So it was a huge year for her, but to focus on Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, directed by Howard Hawks. Betty Grable was originally cast, but she was too expensive. So they went with Marilyn. And because she wasn't quite at the top of peak of her stardom quite yet, she was paid significantly less than her co-star, Jane Russell, who was much bigger at that time. But Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, based on the musical of the same name, which came out a few years prior, and that was based on a novel by Anita Loos from the 20s, tells the story of two friends, Lorelai, played by Marilyn Monroe, and Dorothy, played by Jane Russell, who work as showgirls but have very different priorities in men. Lorelai is more interested in men with money, while Dorothy is drawn to men who she just thinks is attractive without much care for status. But the two of them go on a cruise to France, and Lorelai has a wealthy fiancé, but he does not go with them. Unbeknownst to Lorelai and her fiancé's father is having Lorelai spied on by a private investigator, Malone, who takes photos of Lorelai and makes sure she kind of behaves herself, which she doesn't as much as she starts to flirt with the older diamond mine owner on board named Piggy, nicknamed Piggy, I guess. But Malone also falls for Dorothy, which naturally complicates things. So really fun one to start off with here. Marilyn Monroe, obviously, you know, a lot to discuss when it comes to Marilyn, but tell me your relationship with Marilyn Monroe as an actress, an icon, and this performance.
I feel like I still haven't scratched the surface on her film career, and obviously it's a limited career because of her untimely death, but I've seen this multiple times. I'm a huge fan of Some Like It Hot. That's like my top Marilyn performance and film. I think she's just wonderful in that, and I love that film so much. And then I've kind of started seeing some of her like other roles. You mentioned Niagara, which is like a really interesting movie, especially for Technicolor. I would highly recommend it just for that. It's, you know, all shot on locations, and she's more of a supporting role in that, even though she's like the thing that people sell it on, because how can you not?
Yeah, right.
But and then also obviously like her earlier role in like All About Eve and stuff like that. But as far as her like in this and just like in general, I mean, you know, I think there's kind of this sentiment around us film fans of like, oh, she's known as the dumb blonde and the beauty queen, but she's actually, you know, such an incredible actress and a lot more intelligent and complex than, you know, I think her reputation to maybe the average moviegoer would let on. And I think that comes across in this as like kind of her playing into the dumb blonde prototype, even down to like her final, you know, scene.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. And what are your thoughts on the movie overall? Because I know you've rewatched this many times, I believe, as have I.
I really like it. I think my favorite performance in it is actually Jane Russell, maybe also because I haven't seen her in anything else. So that's like a big blind spot of mine. And I went into it being like, oh, obviously Marilyn, Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend, all that. And she's wonderful and she's so funny in it. But like Jane Russell in it has always been like the surprise standout for me in that. I think it's between the dance number with her and the Olympic team, and then also like her in the trial pretending to be Lorelai at the end. It's just like so funny. The two of them going off of each other is so fun. Same with also Piggy is just so funny to me as well. And those scenes with Piggy and Lorelai are quite funny as well. It's just like it's such a very funny movie. I also love, we talked about like our love of 50s cinema, like 50s, 40, like old-timey cruises in movies. I just love, probably because a
Yes.
modern day cruise does not interest me in the slightest, but like stuff like this, or like the cruise she goes on in Now Voyager, like I'm just like, I'm like, I want to
Yeah.
be there. I want to be on that vacation.
Yeah, or Barbara Stanwyck in The Lady Eve. Yeah. Everything in this era made cruises sound like so romantic and wonderful.
Mhm.
You could meet the man of your dreams and all that stuff. Yeah, I love this movie. I love this performance. Jane Russell's performance, too. I think everything just comes together so beautifully. Even like the tech elements, the color. Like,
Oh my God.
when I watch this movie, like, I'm just like, what happened to color in movies? Like, why does this look so much better than movies that come out today?
Hmm. It's just so bright. Like it almost like breaks
Yes.
your TV. It's so bright. Like it's just like, whoa.
It's just
Also, like even
cranked
from the
up.
opening,
Yeah.
like the use of like pinks and bright reds in this movie, especially, is so great.
Yeah, it's blinding. But yeah, I just really have such a great time with this. Just like on many layers, I think, where it's just like this is a fun, silly little comedy musical, but I also think it just does have this nice underlying message too of just friendship, great friendship cinema and sisterhood between these two that's really strong and kind of also presented without necessarily putting too fine a point on it or commenting on it, like maybe speaking to today's films again, getting a little didactic with the message of like what we're trying to relate the audience to. Oh, this is important, this friendship and sisterhood and all this. This is just kind of presented naturally, So I think that's very refreshing. And it plays out very naturally. And even though they're both kind of like man hungry and everything throughout the film, it always comes back to the two of them, all the way to the end where they're getting double married. And the last shot isn't them and their future husbands. It's literally the two of them side by side in their wedding dresses, So I think that's very key. And I think their chemistry is so believable despite their very different personalities, to the point that they really do seem like sisters who, like, they may get frustrated with the other one a little bit at times, but there's always that foundation of just respect and love there. And for as great as I think Jane Russell is here, I do think this is such an incredible showcase for Marilyn that I found myself, especially on this rewatch, so drawn in by her and what she's doing. I spoke about this a lot with the episode on Some Like It Hot, but it's true where she really does weaponize her sexuality and knows exactly what to do with her voice, her sensuality, her body, her personality to just like get what she wants. Or then, contrasting it with Dorothy, she's much more relaxed and talks much more frankly with her and not as much like the played up breathiness of it. So it's actually quite skillful, more so than I think even people will give it credit for,
Yeah, and I think also you get that juxtaposition between like her and Dorothy, to get like how she interacts with Dorothy versus how she interacts with like the men in her life, be it her fiance or Piggy or like just general other men, and like to have that also be a dialogue within the movie. Yeah, like you said, like it doesn't overdo it or play its hand or make that so obvious. Like I think like a more modern movie would have that point about how like, you would want the success for your daughter, you would want her to marry someone wealthy, that's my like that point would come across so much earlier and like be beaten to you that like it almost comes off like a reveal at the end that like, oh no, she's in on this, like she knows exactly what
Yeah.
she's doing. It's like not as superficial as it might. It's not surface level superficial. It's more like she's thought about this. This is something that she has thought about and is like, nope, that's what I want. And I think also just the idea of like them being man hungry, it's this idea of like it's what they both want. It's not like what society wants for them necessarily. I think it's just the thing of they like dates, they like men. That's, and there's nothing wrong with that. They can be singers and that's important to them, and their friendship's important to them, and also finding the right guy is important to them. And I don't think that makes it like, I don't think there's anything wrong with that, which I think is what the film brings across, which is great.
Yeah. I don't think the filmmakers or anyone really is judgmental of
No.
that. But, I think even if you don't focus too deeply on it, like, it is just entirely satisfying as a comedic slapstick kind of film and performance. And her voice, some of her lines, and just the confidence she has when she's saying some of the dumber things, especially on top of those musical performances. It's just a joy to watch. And her energy is so infectious, I think. And you may laugh at some of her clear dumb blonde comments, but I do think she, again, has full intention of what she's doing there, that it doesn't feel like a mean-spirited kind of laughing at her.
Yeah.
And I think the two of them are so perfect in their dynamic because she is so sweet and she is the naive one and Dorothy is the wisecracking, street smart one. Even in those moments where Lorelai is saying things that are just impossibly dumb. It's like, I love when she talks with her fiance about Dorothy being dumb because she falls in love with men because they're handsome compared to her, who's only attracted to men who are rich. And she leans into like the irony of those lines, where there's one in particular I love where she's like, she really needs someone like I to educate her.
Yep.
Which is very endearing rather than it feeling like condescending or dumbing her down. There's just like an underlying respect, I think, that Marilyn has for this character that I think is well-intentioned and really sweet. And that's what makes it come across as more three-dimensional than it could have been, I guess. And she also seems genuinely invested at times in setting up Dorothy with this wealthy man and to like stop her from being so frivolous with her interest in men for their attractiveness, and like really commits to that irony where they both try to get across to the other person to see how their priorities are wrong when it comes to love. And even though, again, like Lorelai is presented as the naive one, there is just kind of a practicality with how she lays it all out, that it's sort of like, you respect it. You get where she's coming from, being like, marrying someone with money would kind of literally afford me happiness.
Yeah. And like, just, I forgot about the funniest part of this movie, which is her being so dead set on setting Dorothy up with a rich guy, being like, oh, look at this list of the people on the boat. I want her to sit next to this guy. And the reveal that it's just a rich little child, who's also like maybe the funniest character in this movie. It's so funny, just of like,
Yes,
Lorelai, I don't think this is gonna go your way for her.
Yes, and just his very deadpan reactions to her are so funny. I love the point later on, I think, where he talks about like how she has this animal magnetism. And she's just like, where did this kid come from? But he says it so flatly. And just to speak to also the relationship with Piggy, there is that fine line between how she talks with Dorothy and those moments of flirting with Piggy and playing up the baby voice. And you can tell, like, even when she's talking with him, like, and he's telling all these stories about his trips to Africa and all this stuff, she really butters him up and says stuff like, sometimes my brain gets real starved. And then, like, you compare that to her talking with Dorothy, it's like night and day. Yeah, it's just a really, again, very skillful performance. But it's also, I think, this isn't really related to the performance, but I think it's worth noting how, like, Dorothy's choice in that moment where she notices Malone taking those pictures of her and Piggy, it isn't necessarily to confront Malone about it or like jump to conclusions about him, like liking Lorelai more than me or anything. It's just like this instinctive protectiveness to warn Lorelai and help her out, rather than make it a whole thing with like a love triangle necessarily. Like, they're never fighting over the same man at any point, which I think is, again, part of what's helped the movie last as it has, is that sisterhood. And I think you can also see why, like, this is based on a female author's novel. Like, that part of it really comes into play in moments like that, where I feel like it would be so tempting for like a male screenwriter, if this was just an original thing, to make it like a love triangle type of thing,
Yeah, I feel like if it had gone that route, I don't think it would be as timeless and as memorable today. Like, I'm sure there's plenty of movies like that from that time that, might have this
Yeah.
look, but they're not written with the same amount of like care and detail that they just immediately feel dated. I'm sure you've seen this in your journeys through cinema.
Oh, yes. And you see what the industry and Oscar voters tend to prefer in films about women, and it's rather glaring.
It's very interesting, the like, and I'm basing this solely on having also recently watched His Girl Friday, but the Howard Hawks female protagonist and his like more complex female characters in relation to some of his contemporaries is very interesting.
Absolutely. Yeah. And again, not underlined as like a great, strong female protagonist type of thing. Like they're
Exactly.
just allowed to exist and make their own choices and have the freedom to make those choices, and we're with them the whole time. So yeah, very refreshing, very ahead of his time. And again, contemporary filmmakers should maybe take some notes. But anyway, the whole thing where like Malone is revealed to her fiance's father that like she's been inappropriate on the trip, and that straining her relationship with her fiance from afar at least is interesting. And also she's now in possession of like Piggy's wife's tiara, and the wife wants that back, so everything's a mess. But there is something kind of hopeful about it at the same time, because it's like the two of them, her and Dorothy, still just have each other, even if they have nothing else, and they will figure out what to do. They always do. So quietly sweet in moments like that. But obviously we do have to talk about some of the musical performances, which are what has lasted, I guess, the most in the culture of this movie. We can definitely talk about Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend. I'm sure you have thoughts on that.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's either that or the white dress in 7 Year Itch are probably the most iconic Marilyn Monroe images, at least in cinema, and like even parody beyond parody to this day. But then when you actually are watching it, like I remember my most recent viewing, I showed it to my fiance who hadn't seen it because I was like, he's he likes a lot of like classic film and musicals when they have that like that what the word I'm looking for is quirk, but that like turn that makes them like stand the test of time and be a lot more interesting to like a modern audience. And I remember it's just like, I'm like, well, obviously this scene, but it's like you forget about like the whole opening and like just the colors and the other dancers. It's just like when she's like fanning them away, going no, 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 and like it's just so funny, and like she sells it so well. But she's simultaneously sexy but funny, but not. She's not trying to be sexy. I think that's kind of the whole Marilyn balance, and it's just like it's never too much in either direction, and she's just like. It's, of course, you watch her and you're like, yeah, of course you became the biggest movie star ever.
Thank you for listening to this preview of A Woman Robbed, a bonus series from And the Runner-Up Is. If you liked what you heard and want to hear more, please go to patreon.com/andtherunnerup.is and become a patron. Only $3 a month will get you access to bonus episodes and early access to regular episodes. Thank you so much for your consideration.